pensando em mudar de profissão ou ter uma profissão nova, começar a trabalhar? Já pensou em trabalhar no mercado financeiro? Já pensou em trabalhar com liberdade geográfica, poder trabalhar de onde você quiser? Ou também já pensou em fazer um salário empilhável que ano a ano você vai ganhando mais? Então eu vou te apresentar aqui a formação de consultores de elite da Portfel. Essa é a formação que vai te pegar do básico e levar ao avançado para entregar tudo o que você precisa para fazer parte do time dos melhores consultores financeiros do Brasil. Mesmo se você ainda estiver dando seus primeiros passos nesse mundo, tá bom? Olha só o que você vai ter. Bootcamp presencial. É um evento presencial que vai te transformar em uma verdadeira máquina de captação de clientes. Você vai ter um treinamento com o Thiago e com os melhores vendedores do Grupo Primo. É uma experiência inédita no mercado financeiro, tá? Encontro com os sócios do Grupo Primo. Você terá 6 encontros online com diferentes sócios do Grupo Primo. Em cada um dos encontros, você vai masterizar uma habilidade essencial para o seu sucesso como consultor. Você terá calls quinzenais com os analistas da casa de análise que mais cresce no Brasil. Serão conversas e informações de bastidores que só um profissional de investimentos tem acesso, tá? Sinta-se privilegiado, pois um consultor de elite merece uma equipe de análise de elite também. Treinamento de comunicação. Você saberá exatamente o que fazer e como fazer para que seus clientes enxerguem você como um profissional de elite. Tudo isso pela mesma equipe que faz os maiores influenciadores de finanças do país chegarem aonde estão. Conversas com gestores. Nós te daremos acesso a conversas exclusivas com grandes gestores de fundos de investimentos no Brasil. Pouquíssimos profissionais no mercado têm esse tipo de abertura com os gestores, mas nós te colocaremos para aprender com os melhores. Nada mais valioso para um profissional de investimento do que estar por dentro de aspectos qualitativos dos fundos. Oportunidade para atuar na Portfel. Após completar a formação, você agenda a sua avaliação para começar a sua carreira na Portfel aqui no Grupo Primo, a maior e melhor consultoria de investimentos do Brasil. Esse será o início da fase mais promissora da sua vida, eu tenho certeza. Acompanhamento com consultores de elite. Nós vamos te entregar o que nenhuma outra formação te entrega. Mentores que já são consultores de elite para te ajudar a avançar mais rápido. Esses consultores já possuem sucesso na carreira de consultoria, sabem como chegar lá e vão te pegar pela mão para que você avance anos em questão de meses. E o melhor de tudo, você pode ter o seu dinheiro de volta. Todos que captarem 10 milhões de reais nos primeiros 12 meses como consultor terão 100% do seu dinheiro de volta. 100% dos consultores que atingiram 10 milhões no último ano conseguiram em menos de 12 meses. Então você também pode conseguir, beleza? Quiser saber mais, quer se tornar aqui um consultor de elite, quer trabalhar na Portfel, quer ganhar dinheiro no mercado financeiro, ajudando as outras pessoas a enriquecer, link na descrição, QR Code na tela, faça a sua inscrição.
Primos e primas, olha só, hoje a gente está aqui com o Rami Goldratt. Ele é o cara do mundo dos negócios, tá? Ele vem de uma família, tá, incrível. O pai dele escreveu esse livro. Talvez você já o conheça. Esse daqui foi eleito como um dos 25 livros mais influentes sobre gestão de negócios da história. Foi eleito pela revista Time. Então é um livro muito importante, tá? E o que significa Goldratt? Goldratt significa gold, ouro, e rat seria de advice, seria de conselho, né? Então seriam conselhos de ouro. Esse daqui é a história do sobrenome dele, da família dele. E hoje ele veio para trazer para a gente conselhos de ouro no mundo dos negócios. Então se você tem um negócio, se você é um empreendedor, se você quer começar um negócio, ou se você trabalha numa empresa e você quer que essa empresa cresça, você precisa conhecer mais sobre essa teoria que não é só uma teoria, ela vem sendo aplicada e vem revolucionando o negócio ao redor do mundo. Eu vou ter a honra de conversar por mais ou menos 1 hora aqui com o meu mais novo amigo, Rami Goldratt. Então seja muito bem-vindo, Rami.
Bom dia.
Bom dia. Welcome to PrimoCast, the official podcast of Grupo Primo. And in today's episode, we are diving deep into the world of business strategy and operational excellence with Rami Goldratt, CEO of Goldratt Consulting and a leading authority in the field of business. Rami has helped countless organizations identify their biggest challenges using his own methodologies and transform them into opportunities for growth and efficiency, increasing their profits. Companies he has helped become more profitable are examples such as Procter & Gamble, Vale do Rio Doce, Boeing, Vivara, Embraer, Riachuelo, and many, many others. So, Rami, thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, thank you. I brought my suit. Apparently, I'm the only one wearing it, but especially for you.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm very honored. Part of our company uses clothes as I'm using right now, and half of it uses...
I know which half I belong to, probably.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's an honor for us. And actually, today will be a day I'll ask you a lot of questions, not only to make content, but also to make my company have higher profits. So thank you so much.
That's what I do.
And Rami, before starting and talking about theory of constraints, let me just let the audience know this is a book your father wrote, right?
Correct.
And it just got translated to Portuguese.
I think that it was translated several years ago already, but we're doing our best to revive, update the translations. And
Okay. So if you want to go deep into this book, you can buy it. It's available on Amazon.com. We'll leave the link in the description. And before we proceed, could you tell me a little bit about this book?
Of course.
I mean, who should read this book and what could we expect to improve after finishing the reading of this book?
So the goal, or a meta, was written actually in 1984, 40 years ago. Today we celebrate the 40th anniversary. And it's actually considered in the world one of the best-selling management books in history. Millions of copies, over 30 million copies, and translated to almost any language you can think of, including dialects in like Hindu and Marathi and in India, and Tamil even. So, and it's taught in many business schools and university, in engineering school, in industrial engineering, business schools. Basically, when my father wrote the book, he wrote it as a novel. And that's the book that introduces methodology, the theory of constraints, to the world.
Okay.
And he wrote it as a novel, and I think it was one of the first business books that were written as a novel. And I remember my father, he's no longer with us, by the way, passed away in 2011. And I remember he was telling that initially when he introduced this book and tried to convince publishers to take it, they said, Dr. Goldratt, we highly honor you, but we don't even know which bookshelf to put it on. Is it a novel? Is it a business book? What is it? And until one of the publishers, North River Press, decided to take it on board, and it became what it is.
Yes, I really like heavy books, but when we mix the concepts with a novel, it's easier to read.
It's easier to read, and it's actually easier for people to reflect it to their lives, because if you write a good novel, what you're really trying to do is you're trying to make sure that the reader sympathize with the situation, identify himself as one of the characters or aspirations that he has. So, and that's what the book is doing. It tells a story of a plant manager that has a big crisis. He's informed by the group chairman that they are going to close this plant in 3 months because it's losing money. And then the book continues and share how this plant manager suddenly remembers that he had this professor that taught them something very unique, and he's meeting this professor, and the professor called Jonah is guiding him how to transform his plant from losing money to be the best plant in the group.
So you teach us today how to make more money on our business.
I hope so.
Yeah, so let's do it. But before talking about this, you have like a very different last name. It's Goldratt. Is there some backstory on that?
So I'm Jewish. I live in Israel.
And I love Israel, by the way. I went 3 times already to Israel. It's a very nice place.
Thank you very much. Yes, unfortunately, we have tough times now, but
Yes.
during peaceful times, actually, it's not what you watch the news and you think it's war all the time. Actually, last year it is, but other than that, it's a very peaceful country and amazing, has a lot of history and religion, obviously, but it's very modern as well. So the Jewish people, when they lived a lot of them lived in Europe during the Middle Ages. In the year, I think it was around 70 after Christ, and then 130 after Christ, when we rebelled against the Romans, they just exiled us from Israel to the world. And in the Middle Ages, we were forced to have last names in order to be able to identify the person. So if you are just called Rami, we don't know who you are, and you cannot just say, I'm Rami, the son of Eliyahu, the son of Abraham, the son of this, the son of this. It's too long. So we need to put last names, and the rulers in Europe force us. And most Jewish people then either picked their profession as a last name or their city where they live or something like that. So in ancient German, not modern, but ancient, Rat means a counsel, giving advices, counselor. Like till today, Stadtrat in Germany means the city council. So Goldratt actually means a golden advice.
That's why we're here today, to give us golden advice.
This is coincidence, really.
No, but actually, your family has been giving us good advices through the years. And today, I hope to have a lot more of them. But okay, going to the topic here. This book talks about this guy that worked in a plant, and he had a lot of constraints. And then he started as someone who was working in a company with a lot of difficulties, and then it changed a lot, and he started improving the process, the business, and he made more profits. I want to do this also in my company. As I told you, we have a business of education here, and we also have a financial advisory business here. What is the starting process to look at my company and make it more profitable?
So the theory of constraint, the main principle of the theory, which my father called inherent simplicity. Inherent simplicity. Inherent means it's embedded inside. Simplicity is the opposite of complexity. And inherent simplicity basically means that even though on the surface level we see very high degree of complexity, a lot of different elements and factors that interact with each other. You touch one side of the system, it has effects elsewhere. If you really take the time to look at the system as a whole and understand the cause and effect that governs the flow of the system, you will be able to find very few constraints. Identify few constraints. There are many difficulties, many obstacles that you need to overcome, but few constraints. Constraint is the focal point, the one thing you need to focus on, that if you're able to manage it better, the entire system will make more throughput. Throughput is like goal units that you generate more. So first you need to understand what is throughput. Let's take your education business. What is throughput? What does it mean? What do you want to achieve more? Is your education about achieving more profit on its own, or is it about achieving more audience that would appreciate to learn more about your services and about the knowledge you provide? You need to understand, to be very clear about what is the throughput that you want to generate.
Okay, so the idea of the throughput is to know exactly what you want to achieve.
Correct. What is that you need more of that will be considered success for your business?
And do you think it's hard to know what we want more of? Actually, when you talk to the business, usually they don't know what they want more.
I think that it's not so difficult. If you want to really precisely verbalize it, then it becomes a little bit more tricky. Different people have different opinions about the words, or they're more picky. But like most businesses out there, a business is set honestly to make more profit. So the goal is to make profit. Of course, not just in the short term, but to make profit now as well as in the future. which for this reason you need to keep customers happy and employees happy, of course. It's not at their expense, but it's about making profit. But when you talk about education, when you have several businesses that feeding each other, this is where we really need to understand what it is that we want more of. And the immediate next question will be, okay, so where is your constraint? Where is the focal point that really dictates your ability today to get more of this goal? Because there are many difficulties, but it doesn't mean that if you overcome each one of these difficulties, immediately you will make more throughput. But the constraint is your weak link or the point that really dictates your ability to achieve more of your goal. Is it in producing more content? Is it in getting more subscribers? Is it in getting more conversion of subscribers to paying subscribers? We need to understand where is this constraint, the focal point that we need to really put our attention on. Focus. TOC is all about focus. Focus our attention in order to think how we better manage this constraint. So I will need to ask you.
Okay, so we kind of start from 2 points. The first one is having a crystal clear vision of the throughput, the thing you want to achieve more.
Correct.
And after knowing exactly where you are going, you must think about what's on the way that is not allowing you to reach there.
Correct. That is controlling your ability to get more of this throughput.
Okay, so
And it's not many things. It's a few things or one thing.
but you mean there are a few things, or we have a few things that are very important in terms of constraints?
The way to think about it is to say a constraint is a certain resource, I would say, that if you have more of it, if you are able to manage it so you can get more work through it, you'll get immediately more throughput.
Can you give us an example?
Of course. So maybe I'll start with the manufacturing, what the goal is about, right? Production. So let's take a company that I don't know, just a recent company we work with, they make boilers, okay? But sophisticated boilers. It's a B2B company, that these boilers can go eventually to become part of a nuclear facility or a refinery or like sophisticated facilities. So it starts, of course, with buying raw material and then, shaping the steel, etc., to create the body of the boiler and getting all the other parts that goes into it and the electricity systems, etc. And then there is a section in the process that is the welding section that needs to weld it all together. And then after it, there is something called surface treatment that needs to make sure everything runs together, etc. And you then have a finished product. When you look at this, I made it very simplistic, but you understand what I mean. So then when you look at the flow in this system, you saw very quickly that the welding department was the major constraint for the business, because that's where work got stuck. That's where you saw a lot of work in process piling up in front of it. Okay? And then it was very apparent that if you can get more through the welding, you will get eventually much more products out the door. Okay, now the question is, how do you do that? And how do you do that in TOC? The most fundamental process, which is written in the book, The Goal, is called the 5 focusing steps. So after you identify the constraint, the second step is to decide how to exploit it. Which means how the system should be managed to get the most out of the constraint. Okay? And then in the case of welding, it was quite apparent in this example, because we saw that there is a lot of time that the welders are not welding because they were busy bringing all the stuff together and setting up the equipment. And a lot of the time, all the parts that needs to be welded together were not there available. So you had to stop the job and wait and look for the other parts that are not available and bring them together. So even though it's the constraint was idle, honestly, from time to time. Another thing we saw in this case, that there was a lot of rework. So they thought they completed the welding job and they moved it forward, but when it reached quality control, for example, they said, no, the job is not done correctly or not done to spec. So you need to redo it. You know, in theory of constraints, when we deal with, let's say, manufacturing or engineering work, after you found the constraint and you think how you get the most out of it, if you see that there is a lot of rework that the constraint is working on, we treat it like a crime. Because if the constraint is, you have a real bottleneck. So every hour you lose on this bottleneck is an hour of throughput that you lose. So if you do rework, what does it mean? It means that your constraint work on something and it reached all the way to the end, and then it's not the right thing. It needs to redo it. Think of the waste and the waste is a waste of throughput, not money, not the cost. It's tremendous. So exploit is the second step. The third step is subordinate everything else to the above decision. In other words, make sure that all the other sections in your organization or operations are aligned to enable you to get the most from your constraint. And the fourth step is elevate. Elevate the constraint means add more capacity. I'll use like a simple terminology. You first squeeze the lemon and make sure you get the maximum juice from the lemon before you buy more lemons. Because you want to make sure that every money you invest in buying another lemon will give you the most throughput. So first exploit before elevate. Just to finish, the fifth step is beware of inertia. The constraint can move. So you always need to make sure and understand what will be your next constraint. So you can prepare yourself to deal with it.
I have a lot of questions here.
Sure.
Later on, we'll talk about inertia, because I saw a lecture of you talking about inertia for like a full an hour. And it was a very good presentation.
Thank you very much.
But let's talk about the constraint again. Sometimes it's very difficult to know what is the real problem you're facing. Sometimes. So I can tell you some of the problems we have in our company, but I'm not sure of what is the right constraint to focus on to fix the problem. So do you have some specific questions you usually make to the business owner?
So first of all, when we see that the constraints are, there are many times that we go to an organization and we try to see where's the constraint, and we first talk to the people and they tell us, well, it depends which day of the week you come. The constraint keeps moving, right? And when the constraint keeps moving, usually it's a product of your policies. It's an outcome of your policies that make the constraints move all the time. For example, when you say, let me maximize my efficiency. So I will work with very large batches. Large batch means that I will work a lot before I'm moving the work forward in the process to the next department, I would say. Like I will work on several podcasts and several chapters and edit them, etc., and only then move them onwards. This now, as this big batch of work move onwards through the process, it's like a snake swallowing a cow, right? So you see the constraints moving through the process, right? So again, the first question will be, where do you think, because managers have good intuition, so where do you think intuitively is really your bottleneck, is really the thing that clogs your work, the thing that if you open it, not only this department will make more, your entire organization will make more throughput. That's assuming we define the throughput, right? That's like the best guiding question that I found. Okay, so if I will need to ask you, where do we need to focus to make more? Let's assume you said profit. I will say, where do we need to focus to get more profit? Or if you said we need to have more, I don't know, quality content. What is preventing you from getting more quality content? Where do we need to focus on? Just as an example.
Can I talk about my company to use it as an example?
Please.
Maybe to talk on that. Here in our company, we produce a lot of content, and we have 40 million people watching us every month, and a lot of them wants to invest with us. So they put their names on the forms, and then we send this lead to our financial advisors through our CRM. So we have tons of leads. This is very good.
So that's not your constraint.
Depends, because it's very good, but it's also very bad. Why? Because when I didn't have any money, I valued a lot every lead I've got, you know. And now that we have an excess of leads, we probably have a lower conversion rate because they call someone. If this doesn't work, they have another lead to call. You know, so maybe they could increase the conversion rate. So I think, from what I'm thinking now on the top of my head, that maybe our constraint, or one constraint we have, is the conversion rate.
Correct.
Am I correct?
Absolutely. That's why I said your constraint is not the number of leads. It's not the reach to the customer, but to convert them. And then what we need to think of is how do we exploit better this conversion? How do we increase it, right? Is it because, or what is preventing you from increasing this conversion? Maybe because you're having too many leads and you're spending too much time on leads that are not qualified, because of that, your conversion is low. Because you don't have a problem of getting a qualified leads. You just need to find these golden fish in this huge pool of fish that you have. So how would I approach it? I would say, okay, let's see if we can put some gates in the process before you are interacting with these fish that will funnel the right fish to your door. So you're not wasting time on unqualified leads. Okay, that will be my first approach. Then I will look at, see how many of these qualified fish do we still have conversion problem of the qualified fish into. Do you mind if I call it a fish? I don't want to insult don't your audience, right? That fish is good luck. So, so, like, how do we make sure that we are converting qualified leads into opportunities, right? Into prospects, into customers. If we see that we still have a problem of conversion, I will then look into the process that your people, let's say, are doing in interacting with these qualified prospects. Okay, are we wasting qualified fish or qualified leads? Sorry, the analogy of fish keep jumping my mind. Okay, but you understand the approach? That's what I will do. And by the way, what you just told me is something we see very often with companies, that if really you have a lot of leads coming in, most likely your attention is diverted to deal with low value leads at the expense of high value leads. It's very, very common.
So when I know what I'm aiming for, the throughput, and I start to ask myself some questions to discover what is the constraint, and I kind of figure out the constraint here, maybe the conversion rate, then I create some hypotheses on the problems or maybe things I could do different and make like test A/B.
Correct. So I will tell you, before you run to hire more people to interact with all your leads, let's see if we're not wasting the capacity we have of your people that interact with them. That's exactly was my point, right? Maybe they are trying to convert leads that they should never interact with them even. We should funnel them out somehow. By the way, funnel them out doesn't mean that you don't pay any attention to them. It just means that you need to create like a route that this fish will swim to.
They get more qualified, maybe.
Correct. But it doesn't mean that you are not paying attention. Sometimes it can backfire. If you're not paying attention at all to leads that you don't want to pay attention to, it can bring you to also ignore the ones you do want to ignore. You don't want to make mistakes, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you need to like create routes for them that they will not waste your people's capacity.
A question here. The theory of constraints maybe has an assumption that you figured out the correct business model of the company, right? Because if you didn't find the correct business model, it doesn't work, right? You must have a good business and validated model, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Sometimes this is the constraint, by the way. It could be.
And how can you fix it? It's so big.
Yeah. Well, it starts, if we see that the problem is in the business model, or in other words, you don't have enough sales or the right margin, or the first thing we want to validate is whether you have a valid value proposition. Are you really offering enough value to enough customers to a big enough market. Because if that's not the case, then obviously you need to worry about what it is, the products you're selling. You should not worry about the business model. You should worry about your core value proposition. My father said something very interesting here. He said, exceptional value is provided when you are able to remove a significant limitation for the customer in a way that was not possible before, and to the extent that no significant competitor can deliver. In other words, you really need to make sure that you understand very well what are the limitations of your customers. The limitation is a difficulty to satisfy a need. Okay, what are the limitations of your customers and how your offering through products or services are removing these limitations in a way that was not possible before. These are the breakthrough innovations.
Very good.
You see, there is my father said there is a big difference between innovation and improvement. Improvement is getting more of what you already have. That's the continuous improvement. And it's not bad. Even the subtitle to the book, the goal is a process of ongoing improvement, okay? However, if you want to have like a jump in performance, a breakthrough, it's no longer about getting more of what you already have, which is incremental improvements, but it's about making like understanding how you can get capabilities you didn't have before. And that's done by removing a limitation. I'll give you an example if you want. Just the example everybody knows. Emojis, okay? The first time somebody thought about emojis, we said, wow, I can communicate emotions and feeling through text symbols. That's a capability we didn't have. Maybe last time we had it was in ancient Egypt.
Yes.
But now if we just continue to add emojis, it's no longer an innovation, right? It's not a big wow. It's an improvement, but not a wow. So the first thing you need to understand is how to remove a significant limitation for the customer. And there are methods to do it. And we're not going to go into it now, but there are certain methods to do it. And if you are expert in doing that, you can be like an amazing entrepreneur or an innovator. Take into account that many people, all of us, you, me, we have many limitations that we will never acknowledge them as a limitation. It's just the way we live. We will only see this limitation when somebody gives us a solution. I'll give you an example if you want.
Yeah, sure.
So think about one of our customers is Omron Healthcare, a Japanese company, Omron. They invented the blood pressure monitor device that you use at home to measure your blood pressure. You know this device?
Yes, yes.
With a sleeve, you put it, when you reach my age, you will.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm 50 years old.
50 years old, okay.
So now this device, this machine turned them into an $800 million company. Just this product.
This machine.
Yeah. So obviously they make many more products now, but this was their flag product. Obviously it provided a lot of value to customers. It was an innovation, which means it removed a significant limitation. What is the limitation it removed for customers? That we don't need to go to a doctor to measure our blood pressure. Now, remember...
By the way, this is my wife.
Hi!
This is Rami.
The boss.
Thank you. She's the boss, yeah.
Of course.
She's the boss.
I see in Brazil, it's like in Israel, right?
Yes. Obrigado, amor.
The ultimate boss. So, we were saying that...
You were giving me an example.
Yeah, we said that people don't acknowledge limitations they have until somebody showed them a solution. So in the case of Hormone Healthcare, they invented this blood pressure monitor device to use at home. The limitation it removed is that you don't need to go to a doctor to measure your blood pressure, right? It's now simple. I can use it at home. But do you think that people used to complain about it? Nobody complained that they have to go to the doctor to measure their blood pressure.
So just the way they learned how to live.
It's just the way we live, exactly. Yes. And we only said wow when we saw the innovation, when the limitation, the technology was introduced that enabled us to remove the limitation. And that's why it's not so, sometimes it's not so easy to find these limitations that you can remove in a way that was not possible before. We need to know how to do that. How do you find limitations if people will not complain about them? And how do you validate it? And there are methods around it.
It's very hard to do it.
It's I don't know. I don't think it's very hard. If you have an intuition in whatever field that you're working on, you just need to change the way you look about reality. Ask different questions.
Yeah, I was watching a speech you gave yesterday. I'm not sure in which country. Maybe it was on India.
Could be.
And there was a phrase that you mentioned, and it like made me pause the video and think about this phrase for some time. It was something about like the real voyage of discovery doesn't consist on looking for different landscapes, but changing the eyes. And it's like, it's easy to find for different landscapes, but to change our eyes, to change the perspective is very difficult.
Correct. First of all, it's a
How
phrase.
to do it?
It's a phrase that was said by Marcel Proust, the French author, not by me, several centuries ago. But Marcel Proust said, the real voyage of discovery consists not in looking for new landscapes, but in changing the way we look, changing our eyes. Like, if you want to find great innovations, you do not necessarily have to go to new markets, new customers. Just ask different questions about the environment you already know very well, where you have strong intuition. And the questions you need to ask should always be from the point of, not from your point of view. It should be from the point of view of your customer. What limitations your customers have? What do they wish to have that they cannot have today, that they find it difficult to have today? Okay? What are their wishes, unfulfilled needs, difficulties, pain points? This is the way you need to look at reality. And when you train yourself to look at reality from this point of view, you'll see endless opportunities in front of you to remove limitations, to find breakthroughs. I can give you so many examples. I will not. We need several hours podcast.
Oh, I would love to hear more examples. Actually, I'm thinking here, and it's very important to think. You know, it's very important to think, to reflect, to ask questions, because we usually go into the inertia.
Correct.
And do the things every day, the same things, and we forget to remember that we can do things differently and improve some parts of our business.
But it's not because people are stupid, dumb, or blind. Inertia is very, very strong. You know, inertia is this force that brings us to behave in the same way, even when we need to change, even when we know we need to change. And we know we have problems, but we keep trying the same solutions, the same tactics.
It's like trying to not eat chocolate when you know you're not supposed to.
Exactly.
It's very hard.
Exactly. It's the way we live. It's the way we look at reality. Okay? I'll give you another example. Okay, so Amazon, right? Huge success. When you read the book about Jeff Bezos, it's called The Everything Store.
It's a very good book.
You see that there is a chapter that talks about their early years. I mean, I remember when I read it, and this chapter says that they hit a major constraint in their operation, which is how to operate their distribution centers. You see, at the time, distribution centers were designed, the whole processes, how to store the products, how to pick the products, how to align the trucks, all those distribution center processes. They were designed to handle large batches of shipments of the same type of products on predefined routes, because distribution centers, they were not stores, they were supplying to stores or to dealerships. But Amazon, the business model was different. Their distribution centers were supposed to be fulfillment centers. They were selling to customers. So their distribution centers were supposed to be stores, sending small orders of multiple products in the same package to infinite addresses. Immediately, all the systems, all the processes that that everybody followed, the inertia, right, of handling distribution centers didn't work. And it created a huge constraint, a huge bottleneck. How do we know it's a constraint? Because that's where work was stuck. That's what delayed the delivery times to customers. I'm talking about the year 2002, okay? So I'm reading this book and I'm reading how they focused on the constraint in the distribution center and how they solved it. And I'm saying, wow, it's like they read the book, the goal, and applied it. And then I flipped to the end of the book, just on the references. And it's written there. I remember this quote very well. So we didn't write this book, obviously. And the reference said the following. It said, here are toward the end, there is like a chapter that says Jeff Bezos reading list, recommended reading list. And it specifies 12 books that he recommends any executive in Amazon to read.
One of them
is the goal. And it says the following. I'll tell you how they describe the goal. The goal, written by my father, Dr. Goldratt, and it says an exposition of, and it said the following. The goal was the Bible for Jeff Wilke. He was the COO of Amazon. For Jeff Wilke and the team that fixed Amazon Fulfillment Network.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, now it makes sense because
it's a very
it sounds
good endorsement.
very familiar, right?
Yes, congratulations on that.
Yeah, it was really, really nice. So yeah, inertia is very strong. And unfortunately, like I shared with you about Amazon, often for us to break inertia, what drives us to do it is a crisis.
A crisis.
Yes.
And how to
only
do it
a crisis
on purpose.
force us to say, okay, we cannot continue and behave in this way, right?
And how to do it on purpose without suffering or with less suffering.
So my father actually had a very interesting technique because he also said, why wait for a crisis to change?
Yes.
Don't wait, because to make fundamental changes under a crisis is not easy, and most companies don't succeed to do it. So how do you do that? You need to create an artificial crisis. What does it mean? He said, if you have a tough problem that you cannot solve, which basically means you're also in inertia, you're trying the same solutions over and over again and it doesn't work. Listen carefully, because it's counterintuitive. What you need to do is to raise the bar. Make the objective much higher. Make your objective much higher so what does it mean much higher? In a way that it's impossible to reach this objective with your current practices. And this forces you to say, okay, to reach this objective, I cannot just think how to optimize my current processes. I really need to think differently. Okay? So, and now it's better you do it before reality forces you to do it. That's why it's not a crisis yet. You just set the objective for yourself to force you to think differently.
Yeah, this is very valuable. I heard something similar, but with different terms, from a person I highly respect here in Brazil. He's called Jorge Paulo Lemann. Do you know him? Like he's the creator of Ambev. He bought
of course.
Burger King and a lot of companies he founded. And I remember when I sit with him and we talked for some hours and I asked him about what is the secret to success. And he told me about 5 pillars. One of them is dream big. Because when you dream big and you make your goals very, very high, just as you said, it sounds impossible for the team to reach. So they start to think differently.
Exactly.
Instead of just improving the process, right?
Exactly. Usually when people talk about dreaming big and putting high goals, it sounds as if you need to do it just to motivate yourself to try more, which is true. It's okay. So usually when people set high goals or tell us we need to set high goals, we think it's in order to motivate ourselves to do more, to dream big. But and it's true. I'm not saying it's not true. But one of the real benefits of setting high goals is, just like you said, is to force you to think differently, to force you to re-examine your practices, your processes, to break inertia. And that's the method to break inertia before there is a crisis.
So creating this artificial crisis
Basically
prevents you to have a real crisis.
correct. Why is it artificial crisis? Because it's impossible to reach this goal with your current
Mindset and process also.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Sometimes we do it to ourselves, you know. We commit to very high goals and then we suddenly realize that it's impossible to reach them.
Do you think this works for personal stuff?
I do. I really do. But there is a twist here. So for personal development, you need to change a little bit the perspective about constraint, okay? Usually when we talk about flow and businesses, we say constraint is the weak link, right? The one that really has the lowest capacity that can break, et cetera, et cetera. Then we need to think about how we get more out of it. But for personal development, it's a little bit different. The constraint still is the thing that it's your resource that dictates your ability to achieve your goal. It's always like that. However, it's not the weak link. It's actually your strongest link. It's because after you realize what you want to achieve in your life, it doesn't need to be changing the world. It could be to have a happy family, whatever is make you feel fulfilled. Okay, I don't want to say everyone should change the world or whatever, but whatever is that you think brings you a feeling of satisfaction and a feeling of security. And
You made me study more on the subjects I was not very good at instead of focusing on my strength.
Exactly.
But what generates me money today is my strength.
exactly.
And we hire people that are very talented on the areas we aren't.
So I would say first understand what is your strength. And then understand what is the constraint. Why are you not exploiting better your strength? Yes. What is limiting you? How can you get more out of this?
And this is biblical, because you must focus on your talents, right? Use your talents.
Well, you can imagine, I mean, my grandfather was a rabbi. So
That's why I learned so much.
And my father as well as me, we learned in a yeshiva. It's a religious school in a religious school system in Judaism.
Very nice, very nice. And let me ask you something. But after that, I would like to know more about the subject you just brought up. But coming back here, you probably visited tons of companies and talked to them deeply and learned a lot. And you discovered a lot of constraints from the companies and also made a lot of companies become more profitable. Do you think there are maybe some usual constraints most of the companies have? Like, did you manage to see like the same constraints on a lot of companies?
The answer is, of course, yes. First of all, if I can correct you, you say you. I'm not like a one-person show.
Yeah, when I say you, I mean your company, Goldratt, your family,
team.
The methodology.
Actually, I don't think my strength is really in consultancy. I think that I have very good consultants that are much better in consulting companies. Maybe my strength is to surround myself with good people and create a brotherhood with them. But going back to your question, so of course, with time and experience, we do see templates, we do see patterns where, the companies with a certain environment, the constraints are more or less the same. One of the pillars or fundamental beliefs of TOC, that's what my father was very insisting on, is never say I know. So we need to train ourselves not to assume that we know everything, because this is inertia. And even though we think that we know where the constraints, validate it before you jump to any conclusion. I'll give you, example. If I see an environment that is like engineering, startup, R&D, service companies, and I see that they are scaling fast, okay?
Yes.
I can already speculate where is their constraint. Let me explain. These type of environments, which I just mentioned, work is not standard. Okay, R&D, startup. It's not repetitive work that you just can copy and cut and paste. Service companies. Some of it, yes, but a lot of it is not. Now, in this environment, inevitably, to do a quality job, you will depend on experts. Like in consultancy, that's the case. You will have some experts in whatever operations you're doing, and they need to do the job if you want to get the high standard jobs. Makes sense, no? Like,
Yes, of course.
now, if the organization is scaling fast, it means that you're introducing a lot of non-standard work into your operations, which immediately means that your experts will be greatly overloaded. Whoever are the experts. Now, work, and even if you recruit people, okay, it's very difficult to find these experts and recruit them. Most people you recruit will not be these experts. Or it will take time to accumulate the experience that will make them into experts. Now, work cannot wait for these experts to be available. They are overloaded. It means there is a lot of backlog of tasks in front of them, queue. Work cannot wait. So, inevitably, less experienced people will do the job. And with little guidance, because the experts are busy. And it's non-standard work. You cannot just bring them to school and train them and that's it. They can do all the jobs perfectly. It doesn't work like that in these environments. Now, if less experienced people do the job, what will happen?
Less quality.
A lot of mistakes and a lot of rework.
Burnout for some.
Correct? Who needs to fix the mistakes?
The leaders.
These experts that are totally overloaded.
Yes.
Now you have a vicious cycle. They need to do their job and to fix all the mistakes and to train the new people. Now, one of the things we always see in this environment, everybody in this environment will tell you, we need to standardize the work. We need the manuals. We need the guidebooks, the protocols. We call it in industry SOP.
You're kind of describing the meeting we just had.
I didn't know.
No, thank you. Now give us the solution.
I'll tell you. I'll give you a solution. I'll tell you. We need the, just to make sure everybody are with us. So we need the SOPs, standard operating procedures. Okay, that's like the guidebook. Now, what's the problem? Who needs to write the manuals?
The experts.
They're very busy. And since work is not standard, it's impossible to write a manual that will cover, forget about all, most cases you will not be able to cover. So either the manuals will be ignored or they will be followed and you make mistakes. And you require even more time from your experts. You're in a vicious cycle. So I'm not saying you should not write manuals in standard operating procedure, but there is a reason why you don't have them. There is a reason. And the major reason is the people that need to write them are extremely busy and work is not standard. So what's the solution? Let's start by understanding what's the constraint. What is the bottleneck? The experts in this environment. What did we learn? We need to exploit the bottleneck to get the most out of it. How do you do it? You need to define, and that's not easy. You need to really sit and think about it. What is this expertise that only the experts should do? That if it's done by less experienced people, mistakes are guaranteed. What is this expertise? Like in my consultancy, I will say the expertise is not knowledge of theory of constraints. This we can train people. The expertise in my profession will be change management. How do you really convince companies and leaderships to make the changes? Not easy. If you let less experienced people do it, you will fall on your face immediately. Which basically in my profession means everybody will tell you that the customer is obnoxious and dumb and irritated. Of course, all the consultants will blame the customer. I came to learn when my consultants blame the customer, I know job was not done well by us. But never mind, that's another story. I opened my wound to you. So you need to understand what is this expertise that only they can do, should do. And then look at what they're actually doing. And do you think that your experts are doing only this expertise? Of course not. They do many other things as well. For example, if you promote them to become managers, then they need also to manage. Now, I'm not saying do not promote them, but inevitably it means that they do a lot of things that are not this expertise, which is a waste of your constraint. Now, obviously, the next step will be think how you can offload a lot of this non-expert work that they are doing to non-experts. Reveal capacity of your experts, okay? And now comes the most difficult part in this process. Remember, we said these experts are your bottleneck, which means that there are a huge queue of work in front of them. If you reveal some of their capacity, let's say 20, 30%, because you're offloading non-expertise work from them, the pressure will be to immediately fill their time with more work. But that's a big mistake. Because since you're scaling fast, this backlog is of tasks, this queue of tasks is too big for you to manage with whatever capacity you revealed. It's not going to be sufficient. So the real solution, that's the winning formula if you want, is to use the time that you free up from your experts, to use this time for your experts to prepare and monitor less experienced people to do the job. You need to minimize the direct work that the experts are doing to the absolute necessary. They need only to do the expertise as much as possible. Most of the time, you want them to see that they are sitting with less experienced people. We call it full kit, but that's another thing. They need to prepare the less experienced people to do the job. It's not just before they do the job. It's also during the job. You need to define what are the stages that you tell the less experienced people, okay, you reach this point, you have to go back to the expert. He's available because you expose capacity. Back to the expert, so he monitors and review what you have done before you proceed. That's the only way to scale in these environments. Now, as you're doing it, your less experienced people can write the manual, can write the SOPs.
But you think we should have the SOPs? Even though we are
eventually you do, because it's not that every work is different. There are parts that are repeating themselves, and you can follow guidelines. Okay, but if you just think that you can solve the scaling fast problem by having your expert write manuals, you will fall on your face. You need to write encyclopedias.
Yes, you describe it one of our constraints, because last year we generated 2,400,000 leads. So it's a lot of leads. And we sent the best leads to our financial advisors to take care of them. But the best financial advisors, like in a month, their
capacity is limited.
The capacity is limited, yeah.
Correct.
And then the best advisors don't have time to do what you just told us. And we need more financial advisors coming in, and we start to have this problem because we need to hire good financial advisors, but we need them fast. So
that's the problem. That's exactly the problem.
Yes.
That's the inertia.
But the good ones are full.
That's the inertia. That's what I'm trying to tell you. What is the inertia in this system? That you say, okay, I'm very successful. That's why I'm growing, right? That's why I'm scaling. I'm very successful. So I can just keep the processes that made me so successful and add more resources. This is how I'll grow. But that's how you break, because the resources you're adding are many times not this expertise. These expert people are scarce. You need to look at what is the expertise that only they are doing, that only they should do. What are they doing? You will see they are not doing only that. And put interest.
It's like applying the Pareto to this equation.
No, but I'm trying to reveal capacity for the 20% to get more.
Yeah. I mean, 20% of the time of this expert, he's doing something that really depends on his expertise.
Yes, exactly. And that's why you can offload. But then remember, that's, again, the temptation. Think that the top financial advisors, suddenly you give them another day in the week. This is 20% more. Another day of the week, boom, they have. They should not use this extra day
to work more,
to do more, to
thing.
Work on more leads. No, they should use this day. Of course, you spread it during the week to help other people under them to do the job. Now, I'm not saying, my father always said, simple and easy is not the same thing. It's not easy. There's a lot of change management you need to do there. Like some of these experts may think that, knowledge is power. They don't want to share. Some of them say, but the major obstacle we saw actually is that the experts are the ones that will put pressure on you. Just let me do the job. I don't want to correct mistakes. Let me do the job. I better to do it from the beginning. Let me do it right the first time, right? But that's a mistake if you're growing, right?
Very good advice for us.
Okay.
Finishing this podcast, I'll call everybody and talk about that. Thank you for this solution.
My pleasure.
You'll probably try it. Another question.
You see, I was talking from my own pain, right? As a consultancy.
Yes. And this is perfect. So this is why I love doing this podcast. I learned a lot every day. Thank you so much.
Exactly. I still have it. It's very difficult to solve it. It's an ongoing journey.
Yeah. And I kind of opening up a little bit about my heart also. It's hard for me because I'm always between the innovation and doing the same things every day, but in a better way. I'm kind of not so much an innovator as I am like an enhancer, a continuous improver.
I understand exactly what you're saying.
And because I think that innovate is very difficult, and most of the times you do it wrong. So that's why we always try to do the same things, but improve a little day by day. But we need some innovations. Otherwise, we are stuck in the inertia.
You need both,
Yes.
of course. Yeah?
Yes. And another question.
The question is, again, where is the constraint for the business and what is your throughput? If your throughput, let's assume it's money and profit, etc., and you're saying I can do a lot more just by optimizing what I have and getting much more out of it, then you should restrict your innovations, because when you're introducing and changing the strategies and introducing more non-standard solutions because they are innovative, you will hurt the throughput and the flow.
Yes.
Okay. But if you may say, okay, I cannot stay the same I am. I need to renew myself. I need to add more value propositions, more different services, etc. Then you need to innovate. One possibility of a solution is to separate. Okay. To have one unit that you think is on its own and needs to go through the continuous improvement and just getting more through it, but not mix it. Don't let it also do the innovative stuff. Okay, because this will become an obstacle.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean don't innovate. You can innovate and do it separate. Just set up new businesses.
And stay in the business world, but changing a little the perspective here and talking from a more broad perspective. You study a lot. You have a lot of experience, and you talk to a lot of companies all over the world. And you made speeches in a lot of different countries. And from your experience and a lot of companies that you've dived deep, what are like the 3 key principles or principles that you learned that makes the business successful and profitable? Like, are there specific points you learned that all the successful companies make that are
So first
usual?
of all, yes, the first thing is they never lose sight of the customer. So the moment a company is just looking inwards and thinking how they can be more efficient in order to save cost, etc., and they lose sight of the customer and the value to the customer, that's when they start to fail. So the first principle, always look outward, not inward. When you look for improvements, when you look for growth. It's not about, you did not set the company to save money.
You mean don't look only from an inside perspective, but from an
inward
outside
means that
perspective.
all your initiatives are for self-improvement of your own business and not for value to customer.
Okay.
Okay, like how do I save cost? How do I be more efficient? That's inward. How do I protect myself from competition? How do I do the same? It's all inward. You should, to achieve success, never lose sight of the customer, their limitations, and how you're going to remove them. Okay, of course, later you ask, how do I do it in the most efficient manner? But the first thing is value to customers. That's what drives growth. My father said something I believe it's like iconic. He said, you did not set up your company to save money. You set up your company to make money. Okay? So if now all your efforts and initiatives are aiming to be more efficient and save money, you need to relook at what you're doing. Okay? That's not the objective. So that's the first principle.
Okay.
And the second principle is focus. So once I never lose sight of the customer, focus. Focus means understand where are the critical constraints in your operations. And say no to many things.
That's hard, especially when you grow, because the more you grow, the more options you have, right?
Of course, it's hard. You know, when you talk about principles, if they are easy and straightforward and trivial, then I don't need to say to you, right? I don't tell you the principle is to breathe. You need to. It's very hard to say no, and usually it's very hard to say no because from political reasons. Because when people give you ideas and think very strongly about what needs to be done, and you want them on board, you don't want to say no. There is a very famous clip by Steve Jobs from 1997, 6 months after he was called back to be the CEO of Apple. And you can see it on YouTube, this clip. It was a lecture he gave for like an internal conference that he had with Apple engineers, talking about their new strategy, right? 6 months after he came back. And one of the engineers was asking him, what about Open Docs, which is a certain technology that Apple invested a lot of money and effort in developing, and Steve Jobs decided to terminate this. I recommend everybody to see this clip. Just write 1997 Steve Jobs, I'm sure you'll find it. And it's just an amazing answer that Steve Jobs gave to this engineer, basically saying innovation is about saying no. Focus is about saying no, not yes. And you got to say no, 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 no. And then he says, and when you say no, you piss off people.
Yes. That's why it's so hard.
And then he said in 1997, before he launched all these brilliant products that we made Apple what it is today, he said, and when you say no and focus all your energy, your resources on the right things, the result will be amazing products. So it's like amazing answer.
So it's never lose sight of the customer,
focus, understand where are the constraints, etc. Everything we discuss is like another, for me, it's like the second principle that you have to take into account. And the third principle is avoid inertia.
Avoid inertia.
Because inertia is there all the time. It's our nature. We prefer to stay the way we are. And it's good, it's not bad. Up to a point. Okay? Up to a point. The constraints can move. The crisis is always around the corner. Okay? And it's better you're prepared before the crisis, as we talked. As we talked.
Yeah. We have 3 good principles here. So never lose sight of the customer, focus, and avoid inertia.
Correct.
All of them are very difficult.
If it was easy, do I need to say it?
And before I say everything I wrote here, do you have plans of launching different books in the future?
So we launched a new book a year ago, and it's not yet launched in Brazil. The translation is ready. It's about to be launched.
Okay.
Written by my sister. Okay, she's the brilliant one in the family, and I'm just a nice guy. But so she wrote a book called Goldratt's Rules of Flow. Goldratt's Rules of Flow, which describes how you apply the principles in the book The Goal, but to a multi-project environment. An environment where work is non-standard, like what we talked about, standardization is part of the things that are written in this book. And there are major obstacles to flow that you need to overcome, that you need to focus on. These are the constraints in getting more projects out of the door faster. Things like bad multitasking and lack of full kit and how do you synchronize resources and time. I'm not going to go into it. Amazing book. Written also as a novel. So very easy to read. Not very, I mean, you can read it in few hours on a flight somewhere, on a beach. And I think if you are engaged in projects, this book will really revolutionize your way of thinking.
Okay.
And very soon we will publish another book, which is basically the guidebook of how to implement these Goldratt rules of law in your environment, in your business.
Okay. These golden advices, right? So this book, if you want, you should click in the description. We will leave a link here so you can click and buy this book. And you can read it. And I'm pretty sure you dive much deeper than we just reach it here. And I'm pretty sure you love it. Rami, let me just share with the audience what I wrote here, because for me, it's a very good advice, actually. First is know exactly what is the throughput. So what do you want to achieve more? It must be crystal clear. It's very important for the business owners. And second, what is the constraint? So what is on the way to make more throughput? It's very important to know the constraint. And after that, you must question the constraint on 5 basic steps. First of them is identify the constraint, obviously, then exploit the constraint, subordinate everything to the constraint, then elevate the constraint and repeat the process. One very important thing is beware of inertia, because inertia can kill your business. And you may not even identify it before it's too late. The other thing is delivering value is taking out something that limits your clients. So what is the limitations of your customers and how you're offering the products and services that removes them? This is gold for me. A very good way of thinking how I can create more value to my clients. Like, what can I do for them that I can remove limitations from their lives? It's very important. And you describe it, the problem we face here, that is when a company grows fast, professionals are overloaded. And the solution is not only making the professionals focus on the work they have more expertise, but managing the team instead of just sending more leads or more work for them to do. And the 3 secrets to success that you mentioned are never lose sight of the customer, focus, and avoid inertia. And one tip I'll take from all this conversation is qualify leads better. It may probably improve my business a lot.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for this conversation. Do you want to leave a last golden advice for the people?
Peace.
Peace, yes. Peace is a very good advice. Do you use any kind of social media?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can find
LinkedIn.
me.
Just Rami Goldratt,
Rami Goldratt.
and we'll find you. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you very
Cousins,
much.
thank you so much for this episode, and see you soon on our next episode. But before going to the other episode, don't forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much.